There are moments in life, and especially in love, where you feel like heaven has closed its doors. You pray, but there's no echo. You cry out, but the silence is louder than your pain. And it's in these moments that the heart trembles, not just from grief, but from a terrifying question: has God left me? But listen to me. Silence isn't absence. It's an invitation. You see, we often treat love like a transaction. We give affection, we expect response. We offer vulnerability, we crave comfort. But real love, the kind that changes you, doesn't always speak. Sometimes it waits. It beckons. It tests what's beneath your desire. Philosophically, love is not an emotion that comes and goes like the weather. It's a deliberate, courageous act of the will, one that requires us to remain, even when the emotional signals stop. Love embedded in the chaos of real relationship demands patience. It is forged in the furnace of miscommunication, disappointment, and still the choice to stay. And when God is silent, He is not distant. He is drawing you into deeper waters, not to drown you, but to purify you. Psychologically, this is where we encounter the rawest parts of ourselves. In the silence, the noise of the world fades, and the void exposes our attachments, not just to people, but to our idea of what love should feel like. We begin to notice how much we depend on affirmation to believe we're worthy, how often we equate noise with intimacy. But silence breaks the addiction to performance. Because God doesn't perform, He is. And when you begin to understand that, you stop measuring love by what it gives you in the moment. You start discerning love by how it forms you over time. There's danger in reducing love to pleasure. A relationship built only on feelings is a house on sand. It crumbles in the storm. But love grounded in truth, discipline, and mutual growth, that's a house of stone. It may shake, but it will not fall. And so it is with God. When He's silent, He's building you. When He's quiet, He's trusting you to grow. This is the love that integrates vulnerability with strength, commitment with pain, sacrifice with trust. It is in the silence that your moral character develops. Not because you get what you want, but because you learn to love when there's nothing in return. That is spiritual maturity, to keep showing up in prayer, in service, in surrender. Not because you feel goosebumps, but because you've seen the cross. And the cross didn't speak. It bled, remained. It loved in silence. And here lies the tension. We want unconditional love, but we forget that it's rooted in the unconditional surrender of both parties. We long for someone to embrace us in our imperfection, yet resist doing the same for them. But to love someone not despite their flaws, but because of the shared burden of being, that's divine. It's the kind of love God offers when He's silent, not loud, not flashy, but real. So if you're waiting right now, in the silence of God, in the aftermath of heartbreak, in the wilderness between what was and what could be, don't rush the quiet. Rest in it, because this isn't the end. It's the invitation, not to do more, but to go deeper. He's not absent. He's present in a language that can only be heard when you stop demanding and start trusting. So lean in. The silence is speaking. There are moments in the journey of love, with God, with others, where silence cuts deeper than words. You pray, but feel no response. You love, but you're met with distance. You show up, heart open, soul exposed, but it seems no one notices. And in that stillness, the enemy whispers, "You're being ignored." But listen closely. This is not neglect. This is refinement. See, the world teaches us that love is supposed to feel good, that it's about sparks and chemistry, about someone completing you, constantly affirming you. But if we're not careful, we begin to worship the feeling instead of becoming the kind of person love can transform. That's where the danger lies. Reducing love to a hedonistic pursuit of comfort, pleasure, or emotional security. But the Holy Spirit is doing something deeper. In the silence, in the waiting, in the space where affirmation used to live. He is refining you. Philosophically, love is not merely an emotional high. It is a moral and spiritual force. A sacred structure that organizes the meaning of our lives. It compels us to act not based on desire, but on devotion. It takes courage to love when nothing is reciprocated. It takes maturity to remain when the feelings fade. It takes faith to believe that God is working even when heaven feels silent and people feel distant. This is where love becomes holy. Psychologically, we're wired to seek closeness and response. So when someone pulls away, or when God seems silent, we often spiral into self-doubt or despair. But what if that silence is actually God's way of purifying our motives, of burning away our need for emotional affirmation, and anchoring us in deeper commitment? Because real love, true, grounded, spirit-filled love, is not rooted in how you feel, but in who you become. It's in the fire of misunderstanding, rejection, disappointment, that love becomes volitional. It becomes a choice, a sacred decision to remain open-hearted, even when it would be easier to shut down. That's the kind of love that changes you. That's the kind of love that forms your identity. It integrates vulnerability with responsibility. It merges desire with discipline. It doesn't seek to feel good, but to do good, to edify, to sacrifice, to build something eternal. This is the very heart of divine love. And when God seems silent, He is not ignoring you. He is teaching you what it means to love like Him. He's refining your heart to become more like His, a heart that gives without guarantee of return, a heart that serves even when it's tired, a heart that sees flaws not as disqualifications, but as invitations for grace, because to love someone not despite their flaws, but because of the shared burden of being human, that's the closest we get to divine intimacy on earth. We want unconditional love, but that kind of love doesn't just fall on us. It's formed in us, through hardship, through waiting, through seasons of silence that strip away illusions and leave only the pure essence of who we are and who we're becoming. So if you're in that place right now, or you're loving someone and they don't see it, or you're calling out God and He seems distant, don't run, don't numb, don't despair. You're not being ignored. You're being refined, and refinement doesn't destroy, it prepares. It makes you ready not for the love that feels good temporarily, but for the love that endures. Because that kind of love changes everything. There are moments in the soul's journey where everything you've built begins to tremble. The connection you once felt is gone. The person who once filled the room with warmth now feels like a stranger. The voice of God, once vibrant, constant, intimate, has gone quiet. And suddenly, you're left not just with silence, but with questions. Why now? Why them? Why me? But in this sacred silence, something deeper is happening. It is not simply a loss. It is a revelation, because the silence of God is not a void, it's a mirror. And in that still reflection, you begin to see what you've been worshiping all along. Have we mistaken God's gifts for God Himself? Have we sought love to escape loneliness rather than to embrace responsibility? Have we used romance as a drug to numb pain instead of a discipline that demands our transformation? This is where the silence of God becomes His greatest mercy, because it exposes the hidden altars of our hearts. Psychologically, we are drawn to what soothes us. Relationships become coping mechanisms. Passion becomes escape. We idolize affection, validation, and emotional highs, not realizing that these cravings, while deeply human, can blind us to the deeper call of love. And so God goes silent, not because He's angry, not because He's left, but because He's revealing where our devotion lies. In that stillness, we begin to realizing we didn't want God. We wanted comfort. We didn't want truth. We wanted relief. Love, true love, is not about fulfilling your desire. It's about transforming your desire. And transformation requires truth. Philosophically, love is not a passive experience that happens to us. It's an act of will. It is not just about feeling connected. It's about choosing to stay connected, especially when nothing feels certain. It's not about finding someone who makes you feel whole. It's about becoming someone who offers wholeness. And that only happens when love is rooted in truth, discipline, and growth, not fleeting pleasure. Love requires vulnerability, the courage to be seen, even in weakness. It requires commitment, the strength to remain even when passion fades. It requires sacrifice, the humility to let go of control and to love without conditions. This kind of love is painful, but it is also holy. It does not reduce another human being to an experience, a thrill, a fantasy. It embraces them, flaws and all, not as broken projects to fix, but as fellow pilgrims carrying the same burden of being human. And in that mutual burden, something sacred is born. Not a love that ignores imperfection, but one that grows through it. Because to truly love is not to say, I accept you despite your flaws. It is to say, I will walk with you because I see my own flaws too. It is the death of ego, the death of selfishness, the beginning of grace. This is why God's silence is not abandonment. It's a spiritual cleansing. It removes the noise, the need, the obsession, until all that remains is your raw, unguarded harp and His voice, returning not with thunder, but with truth. Now you are ready. Ready not for fantasy love, but for refined love. Not a partner who fills a void, but one who walks beside you in mutual surrender. So if you feel God has gone silent, ask not, where did you go? Ask, what am I really worshiping? Because when the idols fall, true love begins. And when the silence lifts, you won't just hear His voice, you'll become His echo. There's a kind of love the world celebrates, fast, intense, consuming. It lights up like fire but burns out just as quickly. It promises everything but requires nothing. It's love without discipline, love without cost. But that's not the kind of love the Spirit of God prepares you for. The silence you're enduring, the heartbreak you're carrying, the waiting that feels like it's stretching your soul, none of it is wasted. God is forming in you a love that doesn't just ignite, it endures. And endurance isn't born in ecstasy. It's born in tension, in contradiction, in stillness. You see, real love isn't found at the mountaintop of feeling. It's forged in the valleys of decision. Philosophically, love is not merely an emotion. It is a principle of being. It is what gives our lives direction and meaning. To love is to say, I choose to bear the burden of your existence alongside my own. And that choice, that sacred vow, is not made in euphoria. It is made in the chaos, in the moments when staying feels harder than leaving, when sacrifice feels heavier than desire. That is where true love begins. Psychologically, we are conditioned by culture to chase what feels good. When passion fades, we panic. When affirmation stops, we retreat. But what if those moments of relational silence and emotional dryness aren't the death of love, but the refinement of it? Because love isn't about always feeling close. It's about choosing to remain close, even when everything inside of you wants to run. God allows us to walk through the chaos of relational confusion not to torment us, but to teach us. He uses the noise, the discomfort, the silence, and the imperfections to purify what we believe love is. He strips away the fantasy. He allows the disappointment. And in doing so, he shows you real love is not about what you get. It's about what you give. Love in its truest form is not passive. It's active. It's not dependent on mood. It's anchored in character. It is a voluntary act of courage. It is responsibility with emotion, vulnerability with wisdom, sacrifice with joy. And when we begin to love like this, through the breaking, through the fire, we become more like Christ. Because God's love is not glamorous. It's gritty. It's a cross, not a crown. It's staying when others walk away. It's forgiving what seems unforgivable. It's seeing brokenness and leaning in anyway. We often pray for unconditional love, but rarely understand what we're asking for. Because unconditional love does not mean loving someone when they're perfect. It means seeing the wreckage of their humanity, the flaws, the wounds, the inconsistencies, and saying, I will walk with you through it, not around it. And that is exactly how God loves you. So how do we live out that kind of love? We start by surrendering our fantasies of perfection. We accept that love and pain are often intertwined. We stop chasing fireworks and start seeking roots. We learn to love not in spite of the other person's flaws, but because we share the burden of being human together. And here's the paradox. When you love in this way, you don't lose yourself. You find yourself. Because love doesn't just reveal the other person, it reveals you. It shapes your identity. It refines your soul. It awakens parts of you that selfishness could never touch. So if you feel the silence, the waiting, the tension, don't despise it. You're not being denied love. You're being prepared for the kind that lasts. There's a question many hearts silently whisper: how do I love someone who is broken when I myself am breaking? In a world that idolizes perfect chemistry and effortless connection, that question feels too heavy, too real. But if love is anything, it is this: the courage embrace of imperfection. You see, God never designed love to be a fleeting escape from reality. He designed it to transform us within the very heart of it. When we look at love as a mere emotion, something that comes and goes, we rob it of its sacred purpose. We reduce it to a thrill, a dopamine hit, a momentary alignment of feelings. But true love, real holy love, it's a fire. It burns away selfishness, purifies motives, and awakens the soul to the divine image etched in another human being. Philosophically speaking, love is not just a sentiment, it's a moral compass. It's the organizing principle that brings meaning to our chaos. And that kind of meaning cannot be manufactured in comfort. It must be cultivated through suffering, sacrifice, and commitment. And here's the mystery: that suffering is not a sign love is failing. It's the evidence that love is working. Because when we truly love, we willingly endure the pain of being seen and still staying open, vulnerable, real. Psychologically, this is terrifying. The brain craves safety, familiarity, control. But love demands we surrender control. That we open our heart to another human being who may misunderstand us, disappoint us, even hurt us. And still, God calls us to love. Why? Because love is not about avoiding pain. It's about walking through pain in the pursuit of truth. Love that is grounded in hedonism, a self-seeking desire for pleasure, can never endure the weight of human frailty. It crumbles at the first sign of disappointment. It abandons the moment passion grows quiet. That kind of love is hollow, addictive, illusory. But love rooted in truth, discipline, and mutual growth, that love becomes holy ground. It's the kind of love that says, I see you. I see your flaws. I see your wounds. And I'm still here. Not because you're perfect, but because we carry the same burden of being. And that burden, it's what makes us human. It's what Christ bore on the cross. It's what the Holy Spirit refines in us. To love someone because of the burden we share is to reflect the love of God Himself. He does not love us in spite of our mess. He loves us in the middle of it. And He calls us to do the same, to mirror His grace, His patience, His commitment. Unconditional love is not blind acceptance. It's fierce loyalty in the presence of truth. It doesn't ignore sin. It covers it with grace. It doesn't excuse immaturity. It walks with it toward growth. And in that walk, something beautiful happens. You change. The other changes, and the love between you becomes less about possession and more about partnership, less about control and more about communion. So, how do we live this out? We must become disciplined in love, intentional in affection, patient in misunderstanding, committed in discomfort, honest in our weakness. Because love that purifies you will always challenge you. And maybe, just maybe, the reason God seems silent in this season is because He's allowing you to step out of emotional dependency and into spiritual maturity. Not to punish you, but to prepare you for a love that doesn't just feel good, but a love that makes you holy.